Tense moments in North Baton Rouge. Louisiana's news channel is there. WAFB viewers were first to learn of the situation just 4 minutes after explosions rumbled through the Exxon Chemical Plant. WAFB viewers saw the first pictures of the flames taken by Skycam. WAFB News spoke with workers, eyewitnesses, and officials to keep you up to date on this potentially dangerous situation. If you want your news fast, fair, and accurate, stay with the station that brings news to you first, WAFB.
And I'm George Sells. It's not very large, but the fire is still burning this evening at Exxon Chemical, more than 22 hours after explosions on the plant grounds shook a North Baton Rouge neighborhood last night. Flames still being fed this evening by butane and propane in a steam cracking tower. Meanwhile, state police are giving a tentative cause of the blast last night at 7:48 p.m., but Exxon is disputing that conclusion. And that's not the only dispute tonight. We have a series of reports, first from WAFB's George Caldwell.
It'll likely be some time before officials have an estimate on what Monday night's blast will cost. But even in the wake of such a spectacular and frightening light show, the plant is back up and running. Officials say the steam cracker that blew is one of several, and it shouldn't slow down production too much.
The overall impact on the plant itself, the other units in this plant, is very hard to predict because we can in fact bring in raw materials from other resources.
Meantime, the folks who were inside when this inferno broke out are still recovering today. Contract worker Rex Young was less than 200 yards from the blast. He'd been a contract worker at Exxon for just a week.
It's basically a big boom. Yeah. I thought they might have dropped something like a crane, might have dropped a big beam. Yeah. But actually it was just an explosion, and I felt a big heat wave come over. And that was pretty scary right there. I thought I was going to die.
But despite the deployment of hazmat and despite the intense blaze, nobody died. Some have been critical of Exxon's handling of evacuating workers, but Rex said he simply got his partner and moved from there.
And he came out, and we just went down, and they were just telling us to be calm, walk, go to the assembly point. We went there, and everything was handled pretty good.
But there are questions about how good Exxon is. Just a year and a week ago, 3 died in an explosion here. And of course, there was the Christmas Eve blast of 1989. But despite all this, LSU expert Michael Hooks says he'd rate Exxon's overall safety performance at about an 8 out of 10. He says they're just victims of bad luck considering the amount of dangerous materials they handle. Exxon officials say they hate these situations, but they're ready for them.
Well, although you never want something like this to happen, we plan for it, we practice for it.
I'm George Caldwell, live at Exxon Chemical, where you can see 22 hours after the blaze started, it is still going. Now, state police officials are saying that they do think they have at least a preliminary cause for this thing. They say they believe a belt supporting gas lines snapped, and when those lines fell, it caused sparks, which set off the explosion. Now, we talked to some Exxon folks about this, and the people at Exxon say they can't understand where state police got this idea for the simple reason that the flames are still burning. You can't even get in there at this point. They don't think that there's any way to find out. Now, one last thing we'd like to pass along to you, a lot of folks out there who work at Exxon, and we're told that all Exxon employees, both contract workers and regular employees, are asked to show up at work on time tomorrow. Back to you.
Okay, thanks very much. George Caldwell at Exxon Chemical.
Mayor Talmadge McHugh and officials who handle hazardous material situations say they first learned of trouble at the Exxon Chemical Plant, not from their own emergency sources, but from the news media last night. WAFB's James Rose has been following up on the story today. And James, you tell us the timing of the communication between city officials and Exxon personnel appears to be a key factor in what's less than a perfect rating, right?
That's right, Donna, a 7. That's how the mayor rates the overall performance, response, and communication of all parties involved in last night's explosion at Exxon's chemical plant.
I heard a loud booming noise and felt the house shake.
A big boom, and it just like knocked me off the couch. No, we did not hear any warning systems go off.
That was last night. Many residents here saw flames shooting hundreds of feet into the air. And today, that fire has all but died out. And many residents here are wondering why they never heard any sirens. And some city officials are playing Monday morning quarterback.
There was a time discrepancy in the initial call, in the explosion and the initial call to our communications system. We've talked with Exxon about that.
Another form of communication that may have been delayed was in the Community Alert System, better known as CAL. It uses sirens, loudspeakers, and computer-generated phone calls to advise people of what to do in an emergency. Cal officials say they made their first computer-generated calls at 8:27. That's nearly 40 minutes after the explosion. They say they successfully contacted more than 60% of the people in the surrounding area, but no loudspeakers were used. Hazardous material officials on the scene say that's because they toured the plant early on and deemed it was not necessary.
That information led us to saying that we don't need them to take an immediate action to protect themselves. So that early information led us to hold off on the sirens.
The mayor says the overall experience was positive, no loss of life, and a lot of lessons learned.
I think if we, looking back, hindsight, we would have been well to use the other two aspects of the system. But
now, Exxon spokesman Brian Brabston says no one outside of Exxon was notified for about 20 minutes following the explosion. Brabston says they were excited and very busy assessing the situation. He says it was unfortunate and it should not have happened. And he says the problem has now been corrected. Donna, if there is perhaps a moral to the story, is that, number one, there were a lot of lessons learned, and it was the first time the Cal system has actually been put to the test, and they say it worked very well.
Residents heard the boom and then expected to hear Cal right away, and they were on our phones last night.
Sure were.
Thanks.
Well, it may be hard to imagine now, but North Baton Rouge was not always dominated by the massive industrial complex. There are those who remember it before the explosions, and people who live with those memories every day. WAFB's Marsanne Goldsby introduces us to one very single-minded lady.
This little patch of backyard is all that's left of a long-gone era. The yard and the gentle lady guarding it are a single snapshot of a time when North Baton Rouge was a safer place to live.
It was nice and friendly. We knew people from blocks and blocks.
Edna Jeffrey's family moved here in 1925. Now her neighborhood is the massive Exxon complex and its network of parking lots. She talks about the explosions almost casually.
I've been through one where it blew almost every window out of the house. I could not walk in my house without stepping on glass.
That one was, she says, sometime in the 1970s. The next big one was 1989 at the refinery.
When that one exploded, it just blew the doors, the French doors, wide open. And I think on that explosion, I only got about 3 busted windows.
Then there was last night.
It was just too close for comfort, really. And it was hot.
I have to tell you honestly, if you were my mother or my aunt, I'd be doing everything I could to get you to move.
Well, all my friends and what relatives I have left, they are on me about it too. They said they just don't know how I'll stay here.
Exxon has bought out most of her former neighbors, and she says they have made her offers too, but none good enough to pay for her memories.
If they were to come up with a really good offer to you that would allow you to buy a house and have a lot to live on, do you think you would take it?
At this stage of the game, I don't think so. I made up my mind that I just wasn't going to move.
Marsanne Goldsby, WAFB News.